All right, greetings from Jyväskylä, Finland, and welcome to today's Firstbeat webinar, Mindfulness as a Powerful Resource for Supporting Recovery and Resilience. A very acute topic and something that all of us working in the wellness space should certainly be aware of, for ourselves personally and to our clients. My name is Tina Hoffman. I'm an exercise physiologist at Firstbeat, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. Our guest speaker, Susan Peacock, is joining us from London. A few logistics before we get started. The webinar will last 30 minutes and we will record it, and afterwards you will receive a link to the podcast. During the webinar, the participants are muted, but you can ask questions by writing them in the chat window. After the presentation, I will read out the questions and Susan can answer them. So that means that during the webinar, we can all actually practice being mindful and focus on listening to Susan's presentation. If we don't have time to answer all the questions, we will send the answers to you via email. Now I have the pleasure of introducing today's guest speaker, Susan Peacock. Susan is a chartered psychologist, coach, and mindfulness trainer at her company, LiveWorkWell in London. She works with different corporates, for example, McKinsey, News UK, and the Boston Consultancy Group, and also with several high-level sports teams. Her goal in her work is to help individuals, athletes, and teams learn better focus and recharging strategies in order to build their resilience and improve performance. I've really enjoyed working with Susan over the last few years and seeing her commitment to her projects and overall approach to wellness. She's definitely one to practice what she preaches. As part of her coaching work, Susan has also utilized Firstbeat Lifestyle Assessment, and she might mention that in her presentation. But if you want to learn more details about the lifestyle assessment method itself, you can get in touch with us here at Firstbeat or with Susan directly if you are interested in her coaching. But now I'm going to hand it over to Susan. So Susan, the stage is yours.
Lovely. Thank you, Tina, and great to have the opportunity to spend a little bit of time talking about mindfulness and how my experience of Firstbeat HRV testing has supported this. So I think we'd all agree that we live in a world where we are very stretched. We've got a lot of demands on us. We're almost like computers with too many windows open. And that leads to us feeling quite scattered, quite unfocused, and often a bit overwhelmed. Now, in other areas of our lives, we know the importance of exercise, of sleep, of good nutrition. But our minds, well, that's been the missing link. And I think that is why mindfulness has become so mainstream in such a very short period of time. So the work that I do is working with companies and teams, as well as individuals, helping people be more resilient, enable them to engage with life in a way that they feel equipped to manage change and uncertainty. My background is as a person working in advertising, as a television and radio producer, where I was always interested in resilience. That led to me studying psychology, and mindfulness, well-being is very close to my heart, as Tina says. So I thought that what would be quite helpful is mindfulness is something that you can read about, you can talk about, but you actually need to have an experience of it. So I thought that what might be a good way forward is to start with a little practice. And that may feel very weird to do on a webinar on a Wednesday mid-afternoon in the UK. I know a bit later in other parts of Europe, and possibly people join us from other parts of the world. But I would encourage you to just take a moment and allow yourself to arrive here. I'm sure you've had busy days, lots going on, and quite often when one is engaged in a webinar, you've got other distractions going on. So my suggestion is to just park those if you're able to, and take a moment to get comfortable in your seat. Become aware of the floor beneath your feet. Notice where your body feels supported by the chair. Allow your spine to have a sense of uplift. Your shoulders to be dropped and relaxed. Your chest open. You may want to just move your head from back to front and side to side. Allow it to come to rest comfortably. You may do the practice with your eyes open, and if so, just lowering the gaze, allowing there to be a soft focus. Or you may choose to close your eyes, doing whatever feels appropriate for you. And as you settle into this moment, become aware of the fact that you're breathing. Just notice the natural rhythm of your breath. Knowing that you don't need to control or alter the breath in any way. It's more a case of simply noticing that breathing is happening. So it may be an awareness of the movement of air in the nostrils. Perhaps it's the rise and fall of your chest. Or the muscles of the abdomen, expanding and releasing. Just being really curious as to where you experience your breath. And as this practice unfolds, it's highly likely that your mind will wander. When it does wander, just notice where it's wandered to, and then bring the focus of your awareness back to this full deep inhalation and this full deep exhalation. And now as this very brief arriving, grounding practice comes to a close, being aware of the air on your skin, noticing the sounds around you, and if your eyes have been closed, just opening them. And take a moment to reflect on what you noticed as we did the practice, and possibly what you notice now, having just stopped for a moment or two. And at the end of our session, there'll be the opportunity to type in what you noticed. If you've got any questions, comments, observations, I'd be delighted to explore those. And I think that the word practice is exactly what this is about. It's a practice. Just like becoming physically fit, we are training our minds to become fitter. So if we look at today's agenda, the definition of mindfulness is moment-to-moment awareness of one's experience without judging. And that piece of without judgment is so important. It really does come back again and again to noticing when you get caught into judging yourself. So if we look at what mindfulness is, it's about stepping out of autopilot. Now, I'm sure many of us have had the experience of going from A to B and you arrive and you don't know how you got there. And that is an example of being completely distracted, being on autopilot, not being fully present in this moment. And a lot of research indicates that we are distracted 47% of the time. 47% of the time, we are not aware of what we are engaged with in that moment. So that's almost half our lives. Now, you can take this opportunity to step out of autopilot at all sorts of moments in your day. You know, it may be when you are walking from home to the train or to get into your car. And rather than being somewhere else, it's noticing what is happening in that moment. What's the air on your skin? What are the sounds around you? Noticing perhaps the buildings, rather than getting caught up in your to-do list or possibly being on your phone. It's starting to notice what's happening in your body. You know, we have a body, and a lot of the time we are oblivious to what's happening. And then noticing that thoughts are not facts. We often get caught up in thoughts, but being able to distinguish and see them as a thought rather than not something that is a fact. And then this whole idea of responding skillfully versus an automatic reaction. So that's at the heart of what mindfulness is. Now, in today's session, I'm going to be looking at what mindfulness is, and we've just had a brief idea of what mindfulness is, how it's unfolding in society, and then how does mindfulness underpin resilience, and what is the role of recovery, and how do we support that, and how does mindfulness help in terms of becoming more able to recover in busy days. Now, the UK has been at the vanguard in terms of how mindfulness is developing and in the Western world. And as the result of a couple of peers and MPs having a personal practice and finding mindfulness really helpful in their own life, they decided to offer this to colleagues. And 5 years ago, the first mindfulness training was offered in Parliament for MPs and peers. And they've also been running courses for support staff. Now, in this 5-year period, 175 MPs and peers have taken part in mindfulness trainings and 300 staff members. And as a result of this, and those courses are always oversubscribed, there's a huge interest in mindfulness. As a result of that, a number of governments around the world are looking at the potential for mindfulness being offered. And within the UK, an all-party parliamentary group was set up and delivered a report called The Mindful Nation, looking at the potential benefits of offering mindfulness in these areas. So in the NHS, mindfulness is the treatment of choice for recurrent depression. In education, some of you may already have found that you've got children or siblings who are being introduced to mindfulness at school, as young as 3 and 4, right the way up to postgrad, MBA, leadership trainings. And then in the judicial system, both prisoners and police officers are being offered mindfulness. And then the workplace, and I will say a bit more about the workplace in a moment, but in the years that I've been involved in delivering mindfulness, it's been fascinating to see how it's taking off and how it benefits people. So what is being looked at is, and this is from the University of Cambridge, from their Wellbeing Institute, is how does one move the bell curve of the whole population in a positive direction? How do you support well-being? And whether you are somebody grappling with a mental health issue or somebody who's flourishing and thriving, mindfulness can be hugely beneficial. So I mentioned that there are a number of organizations, and these are just some big brands that we are all familiar with. Intel in 2014 announced that it was going to be offering mindfulness training to all 100,000 of its employees in over 60 countries around the world. And their attitude was, there's no price tag on a clear mind. And this program, which is called Awake at Intel, is being delivered. They have a train-the-trainer program, and so employees are trained to then deliver the mindfulness training. And their reason for offering this was to enable people to quieten their mind so that they can connect with their emotional intelligence. Transport for London had different reasons for offering mindfulness. They had very high levels of absenteeism, and as far back as 2004, they started offering mindfulness training. And they found that in the cohort, they looked at a group of 300 people who went through the mindfulness training. And they found that there was a 71% drop in absences for their two main reasons for absenteeism, which were musculoskeletal and mental health. There was a 50% reduction in absences for all conditions. 82% of these people said that they improved their exercise, 77% improved diet, including a reduction in tobacco and alcohol use, and 54% improved sleep. So really staggering findings. And then Google decided to offer meditation and mindfulness training, and they have found that that's been their most popular training, and it's led to them setting up a separate institute called the Search Inside Yourself Institute. And they have a book as well, which is on the reference list that I'll quote at the end. So the kind of things that people are looking to support their staff with are around emotional intelligence, collaboration, ability to problem solve, to be more resilient. Now, mindfulness comes with some very strong credentials. And I think it's important to say that we are in our infancy at understanding this. So there's a huge drive and huge need for greater research. And a lot of that's being done with a lot more rigorous randomized controls being done. But some of the studies indicate that mindfulness actually changes the structure of the brain, which is a really profound awareness that we are developing around mindfulness. And that you may know the idea of neuroplasticity, where what we repeatedly do has an impact on the brain. So that very primitive part of the brain, the amygdala, which is responding to threat, that fight, flight, freeze, mindfulness helps quieten that down, and we become better able to engage with this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for all our executive functioning. So our ability to problem solve, to manage strong emotions, to connect with those around us. It's also been found to alter activity in the brain, and we come from a long line of ancestors who got out of harm's way, and that served us very well in terms of survival, but not so well in terms of thriving, because we are constantly looking for threat. And those neural pathways in the brain become like a very well-used pathway. And around London, there's a ring road called the M25, which is, for those who are based in the UK, we all know that that's a very well-used road. Now, those neural pathways that are associated with threat, with fight, with flight, and freeze are very well worn. And what mindfulness is helping us to do is to develop some of the B roads, some of the ability to notice what's going well, and to be able to savor it. And it makes sense that that leads to an improved immune system, because we're not having that chronic drip nature of stress. Now, all these articles are available on my website under the resources page, so you're most welcome to have a look at those. Now, I thought it would be really interesting to spend a bit of time looking at how the Firstbeat HRV assessments support mindfulness. And I'm sure I'm speaking to people who already would agree with this, that the first step towards change is awareness. And what happens with mindfulness is people become more aware. They become more self-aware, they become more aware of others, they become more aware of their environment. And then what's really important, and this is where Firstbeat is so helpful, is where you've got somebody who becomes more aware that they aren't weaving much recovery into their day, that their sleep causes problems. How do they work with that? And that's where I find the Firstbeat reports are just invaluable, because you've then got data in full color in front of you supporting what intuitively you kind of knew, the things that clients will often say they've noticed certain things are likely to impact their sleep, or they are aware that they wake up the next morning not feeling as well rested. And then the report actually shows that that's what's been happening. They haven't been able to go into recovery. There's been more sympathetic dominance, and they haven't been able to recharge effectively. And I think a lot of our work with Firstbeat this captures it. True resilience is about much more than simply surviving the worst day of your life. It's about thriving every day. And Rick Hansen, who's a renowned neuroscientist, has done some really interesting work in helping us support resilience. And I think Firstbeat really helps with that. So how does mindfulness underpin resilience? Firstly, you become more self-aware. You notice what's going on. You notice strong emotions. And how do you work with them? How do you regulate them? You become better able to manage your attention. Now, we live in an age of disruption, both on a meta level in terms of what's going on in the world around us, but also, our devices, which are wonderful resources, but they can also lead to us being very distracted. And what mindfulness helps you do is decide, where am I choosing to place my attention? This has pulled my attention away. Okay, let me come back. And working with the breath and that practice we did earlier is exactly what equips you with those tools. You come back again and again. Doesn't mean the distractions stop coming, but you are better equipped to deal with them. We start to notice what's going well. That ability to really incline your mind to notice what's going well. We respond more effectively to others. We're able to be fully present, so we can connect, we can listen, we can hear, rather than being caught up in what am I going to say next, or what's the next activity of the day. And then really importantly, and Firstbeat is great in supporting this, the awareness of recovery and how important that is. Now, Novak Djokovic has spoken about how important mindfulness is to him, and I wanted to read a quote where he says, "I've done so much mindful meditation that now my brain functions better automatically, even when I'm not meditating." And I think that's one of the keys, is this ripples through your day and through your life. He goes on to say, "I used to freeze up whenever I made a mistake. I was sure I wasn't in the same league as the Federers. Now, when I blow a serve or shank a backhand, I still get those flashes of self-doubt. They don't go away, but I know how to handle them. I acknowledge the negative thoughts and let them slide by, focusing on the moment. Mindfulness helps me process pain and emotions. It lets me focus on what's really important. It helps me turn down the volume in my brain." So you're getting a bit of a flavor of how this appeals to such a wide spectrum of the community, for people who are really literally at the top of their game to people who are struggling with certain issues. Now, I love the work of Lowen and Schwartz around the corporate athlete, and often pass this on to clients, particularly who've been involved with Firstbeat assessments. And this idea of bringing the mind, body, and spirit to peak conditions. Executives need to learn what world-class athletes already know. Recovering energy is as important as expending it. So I think we will all have experience, sorry, this is not moving to the next slide, experience of a graph that, oh, hang on. These seem to have got a bit jumbled up. We've all had experience of a graph where there isn't much recovery, that would be looking something like this. And you would then get asked by the client, you know, so what can I do? How can I turn this around? And I wanted to show you some examples of some slides that are taken from a graph where somebody who is an experienced practitioner is weaving meditation and recovery into their day. So here you will see that there's some meditation happening early in the day, and there's a lot of thinking around how you start your day is how you live your day. So building that in first thing is invaluable, and how that then enables you to draw from that throughout the day and the other periods of recovery. And these may be formal practices, but they also may be something like walking to your car or the station mindfully, just being aware. This next graph shows a meeting with a colleague where this person is able to really engage, to be fully present. And in the earlier slide that I showed, this person was traveling. There was air travel involved in Europe. So, you know, it's not as if we are saying you avoid the stress, but as we've often said with Firstbeat, it's about the balance of stress and recovery. So if you look at how this graph moves in a very positive direction, where one is building resources, and that's what we are aiming to equip our clients with. And you can see how this person is able to build recovery in both in their day, but then also getting really good sleep. And from the graphs that you were seeing earlier, you can see there's some good pre-bed recovery, some wind down, and then some good parasympathetic dominance during the night, and good doses of recovery. So if we started to think of how do you weave mindfulness into your busy day, you know, We've suggested some ideas for early in the day, and then creating some space at the beginning and the end of the day. So often when I'm running a group, I'll say to people, who checks emails first thing? And most people's hands go up. And if you think of it, that's an example of being flooded by cortisol, adrenaline, all these demands or requests or actions that need to be done. What would it be like to just take a moment to jot down what your priorities are for the day? And then once you've written them down, you're not using up precious brain space to hold on to them in your awareness. They're held somewhere else. Noticing tension as it shows up in your body. I'm sure when we did that practice earlier, some of you noticed how you're holding on to. We don't need to. What would it be like to let it go? Breaking up your day, getting outside at lunchtime. And then transitions are a wonderful way of weaving in mindfulness. Between meetings, can you just walk from one meeting to the next with awareness and not being on your phone, just letting that one meeting go and then preparing for the next one. Or the transition between work and home. And then at the end of the day, taking some time to congratulate yourself for something you've done well. One of my clients who started jotting his 3 priorities down spoke about at the end of the day, he would highlight one thing that he was really pleased with having achieved. And then at the end of the week, there'd be 5 things he'd listed, the month that would build up the year. And so that's an example of how to start inclining your mind, noticing what's going well. So this quote from the Harvard Business Review, I think is a really good way to end off. Mindfulness should no longer be considered a nice to have for executives. It's a must have, a way to keep our brains healthy, to support self-regulation and effective decision-making capabilities, and to protect ourselves from toxic stress. When we take a seat, take a breath, and commit to being mindful, particularly when we gather with others who are doing the same, we have the potential to be changed. And lastly, this is a quote from John Kabat-Zinn, who's the person who brought mindfulness into the mainstream. And he says, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. So I hope that's given you some food for thought, a little taste of mindfulness, and some ideas of what may be helpful to you, to your clients. So I'll hand it back to you, Tina, for any questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. That was great. A really good little bit of mindfulness at the end of the day for today. And I totally agree with many of your thoughts, and especially really subscribe to the idea that we should not just survive, but we should learn to actually thrive and enjoy the days. And by creating some space and taking the moment here and there, that's really valuable. And it's a good way to remember it for ourselves as well as for our clients, for sure. I don't see any questions there right now, but I do have one question here that we got in advance via email, and it's also something that was in my mind as well. So I'll ask you this one, that you brought out some good facts about how mindfulness, it's not just something nice to have, but it's a must have, but it's sort of considered a very soft topic, kind of a mushy topic. And how do you find that? I know that you have been working in some hard business and corporate world. So how is that kind of soft topic sinking into the hard world of sort of corporate performance? How are people receiving that? And have you noticed a switch in the last years in how it's being received?
Great question. And I think that what is helping is some of the neuroscience. I think it's like in the 60s where people weren't aware of the link between cardiovascular illness and stress, and how exercise was so helpful. I think in those days there was just a lot of exploration, and I remember John Kabat-Zinn going to a conference and saying he was going jogging, and people said, why would you do that? And he said, but that it's such a game changer. And I think that that's what's starting to happen with mindfulness. People start feeling the benefits, and what I really hope with my clients is when we do the trainings that they are able to engage with how it enhances the way they live their lives. And I think in the UK, 7-8 years ago, very few people were integrating mindfulness into work cultures, but that's becoming more and more the norm. And I think what is helping is people are realizing that this isn't just something to be practiced, on a mountaintop, but it's how do I navigate through my busy working day? How do I stay focused? How do I be most productive? How do I access the ability to be fully present in a world where we are so scattered? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. That's great. And it's good to get that message, because I think it helps deliver it to all different kinds of clients as well. So I think it's 30 minutes since we started. I saw a couple of people were sending thank you and their greetings. It looks like we had somebody from Bali listening, so we had people from far away. So thank you for all the listeners. Thank you, Susan, for today's webinar. Like I mentioned, the podcast will be available in a couple of days. We'll send you an email link to that, and you can also find other webinar podcasts on the website. And if you do have specific questions about today's topic for Susan, you can get in touch with her via her website. And if you want to hear more about the lifestyle assessment method that Susan was showing pictures of, you can also contact info@firstbeat.com, and we'll put you in touch with the person closest to you. Next month, we have a webinar on May 17th by Leanne Spencer that will look at strategies for better sleep. So that will probably be our last webinar, wellness webinar before the summer break. So be sure to tune in for that. And then, of course, we have the HRV Summit in London on May 3 and 4. So if anyone hasn't seen that yet, have a look on the HRV Summit 2018 website and see if you can join us there. So thanks, Susan. Great webinar, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.